over the Lo Saseh. And in addition, the Rambam writes, Kol Demei Yisrael, Kol B'Tzavaro. All the blood of Klal Yisrael, all of the people that could be endangered and could lose their lives, is on him. Because each person in the battle makes a difference. Klal Yisrael is in a difficult period in its history. The vast majority of the Jews do not know the mitzvos. They don't understand Torah. They have no idea and have never experienced what Shabbos Kodesh is about. And it's very interesting to note that when the mitzvah of Limud Torah is discussed in the Rambam and in the Shulchan Aruch and in the other Sforim, we're told that it's not just to be lomed. The mitzvah is to be malamed also. It's not as we may think that, oh, my obligation as a private person is just to be a lomed. And it's up to the Rebbeim to be malamdi. No. The Sefer Chinuch writes, the mitzvah Talmud Torah, Shetzivono lilmoid chochmas ha-Torah ulalamdo, v'zehu shenikra Talmud Torah. Learning and teaching is in fact a mitzvah. V'hu omro, as the Rosh Hashiva said, that's v'shinantom livonecha. The mitzvah of v'shinantom livonecha. Which, by the way, in its simplest meaning, v'shinantom means to sharpen, to be precise, to be an Eved Nemon and passing on the Kabbalah from one generation to the next exactly as it's supposed to go. But it means that our kavanah, when we're learning, is to be able to teach also. That's part of the mitzvah. We're neglecting the mitzvah if we don't also do our share in teaching. Another interesting halacha. It says in Shulchan Aruch about the importance of elementary schools. Schools for little children. Moshivin melamdei tinoikos bechol ir va'ir bechol ir she'ein bot melamed v'tinoikos. We have an obligation to establish elementary schools in a city that refuses to establish an elementary school. Hoyu machrimi anshe ha'ir anshe yoshivu melamed tinoikos. We put that city in Chayrim until they agree to have a Talmud Torah, until they agree to have what we call it in the United States, Yeshiva Katana. V'im lo ha'shivu, and if they still don't agree after we put them in Chayrim, machrivin ha'ir, we destroy the city. She'ein ha'olam miskayim elam behevel pm shel tinoikas shel beis rabbah. The world only exists and survives on the merit of the Talmud Torah of little children. So we really touched upon two major ideas right now. One is that, contrary to what people may believe, the mitzvah of Limud Torah, which is Keneged Kulam, is not just learning, but it's also teaching. And the teaching is not necessarily, it's not defined what age. It doesn't define that in the halacha. It just says you have to teach. As was mentioned earlier, one has an obligation to teach one's own children. That's for sure. But Chazal say that when the Torah uses the word bonim, it means talmidim. We have an obligation on every Jew to teach when the opportunity presents itself. And that's part of the mitzvah, Talmud Torah. That was the first idea. The second idea is that there is a special mitzvah about teaching children. It's an obligation, it's a communal obligation. And as part of that, I mentioned the mitzvah from the last week's parsha about the chiyuv of going out to war, and that the soldier who's in battle has the responsibility of all Klal Yisrael. And that brings me to my first suggestion about how to prepare oneself to be a Rebbe. And that is the work that you're doing right here, right now. There is no substitute for limud Torah for oneself, to prepare oneself to be a Rebbe. You need to know Gemara. You need to know Tanakh. You need halacha. You need hashkafa. You can't leave aside any of these areas of Torah. And just as the soldier in battle has the responsibility of Klal Yisrael around his neck, so do the privileged people who are sitting in this room, who have the opportunity to study Torah. Kol Demei Klal Yisrael, Tolui, B'Tzavarechem. The future of Klal Yisrael is dependent on the learning that you're doing right now, on what kind of B'nai Torah you're making yourselves into. And this obligation to help oneself grow doesn't stop when you leave yeshiva. It's a lifetime obligation. And that's really the first step, is the actual learning for oneself. Make oneself a potential role model for Klal Yisrael. That's called gaiva to gedusha. There's a permitted form of gaiva. And that's what we need. We need role models for Klal Yisrael. We need people who dedicate themselves to become Rebbein, Malamdim, people that can be respected, people who work on their midos, who are dedicated to their Torah studies. Related to that, I would say, make a seilich. Find yourself a Rebbe that you can develop a kesher with. Sometimes you have to try to do that. Sometimes the Rebbeim will come over to you, and sometimes they won't. And you have to find one that you feel, this is a role model for me. And it's an effort. Whether it's in the yeshiva, outside the yeshiva, you have to find a Rebbe that you can go to, you can discuss issues with, you can see the way he conducts his Shabbos table. Baruch Hashem, Yerushalayim has role models. But you have to find yours. I believe that's the aleph in the aleph base of becoming a Malamed. It's your own dedication to Torah, learning whatever you can, and finding someone who can be a role model for you as you strive to be a role model for others. That's a sugya all by itself. There's another dimension, which is understanding the classroom. A classroom has a whole social dynamic. It's unique. It's one thing to study with a chavrusa. It's another thing to be in a yeshiva gedola and to learn from choshev rabbanim who are delivering shiurim. It's quite another thing to conduct a classroom with children. So if that's an interest you have, a second step in the preparation for this mitzvah is to do some research. Where are there excellent chadorim? Where are there excellent schools, and who are the outstanding rebbeim? In your neighborhood, in the country you come from, wherever you have to go find out where those people are, and get appointments, and get permission from the school, and sit inside the class. Find out the names of the best rebbeim you can. Get permission from the principal, get permission from the rebbe. Spend half an hour or an hour in this rebbe's class in this school, and this rebbe's class in that school, so that you get a feel for what a classroom is. As I said, a classroom has its own culture, different than the world we're in. And you need to be familiar with that before you go in to teach. And one way to do that is to observe, but find the names of great, successful Rebbeim, who themselves, again, can be role models to you, but now, not as being a Rav, but as being the classroom Rebbe. And don't confine yourself to one school. You'll discover that schools have different flavors and different cultures. Schools on the same street have different cultures. If you get that far, ask the Rebbe, would he give you 15 minutes? Would he give you 20 minutes? And come with a little yellow pad and ask his advice. How did you do it? How did you become so matzliach as a Rebbe? Take notes. Go to 5 or 6 outstanding Rebbeim and ask their opinions. What makes them successful? How did they get there? What's their advice to a new Rebbe? There really is no substitute for good training. Training means taking a course. So I said I'm zoyga to be involved with a course in Lakewood. We have a number of instructors. It meets for a year. 2 evenings a week for a year, plus 4 full days in the summertime. And the topics are many, and each one is important. So that's why I asked for the board. I'll just give you a few examples of the topics. The first is human relations. It's going to be surprising that that's the first thing that I mentioned in teaching. But how do you build a relationship with a child? How do you build a relationship with a parent? With a manal? With a fellow Rebbe? This is really, after you have studied Torah and you have a sense of mission about the importance of being a malamed, the very most important thing is learning how to get along with people. Child growth, this is going to work. Child growth and development. That means, what's the difference between a first grader and a third grader and a 5th grader and a 9th grader and a 12th grader? So some of that you can pick up by going into different classrooms. Some of that you'll learn from having your own children. Some of that you have to read about. This is one of the topics that is discussed in a good course. Okay, I'm going to give up after this one. Mark is not working. Lesson design. Lesson design includes many pieces, and we spend a lot of time on that. It includes motivation. How do you help children want to learn? The truth is, it applies to adults too, and it's related to human relations. It's not enough just to have information. One has to get into the psyche of the Talmidim you're working with to figure out what can inspire them to want to learn. It's not that you give a good shiur. It's that your Talmidim were matzliach, that they learn. And that comes from themselves. So a successful malamed, a successful Rebbe, is someone who understands this important, essential skill of motivating people. We're still on this third item, lesson design. And part of lesson design is catching people's attention and maintaining that attention. How does one make a classroom interesting? As well as, how does one actively involve the people in the class, that they're not passively listening, but they're actually working together and learning? Those are just a few of the key ideas in lesson design. Some of the other important parts of teaching that you'll learn when you take a teacher training course is classroom management and discipline. Now, if you know motivation, and you know how to make a classroom interesting, and you know how to get kids involved in the learning, so classroom management is a lot easier. Good teaching makes classroom management much easier, but one has to learn how to do that too. And the nature of people is that people don't always do it right. And discipline, the art of discipline, requires that one understands how to get the situation calmed down without embarrassing anyone, without damaging your relationship with the child, getting the message across effectively, and not interrupting the momentum of the teaching that's going on. Well, that's complicated. So that's why you see these subjects take time. It's not something that you can learn overnight. But each of these pieces make you the professional you need to be matzliach. I beg your pardon?
Do you want a marker? You can get one.
You can get a marker. Okay. Thank you. So far, we've discussed preparing yourself while you're in the yeshiva, coming to understand a classroom by visiting successful classrooms and interviewing Rebbeim, and taking a teacher training course. I now want to give you a fourth suggestion. Read books. Find good books on teaching. I will give you a couple of suggestions right now. There is a book goes back to the 1920s, by Dale Carnegie, called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And as I said, human relations is really what teaching is about, people. And that book was a book primarily for salesmen, but a Rebbe is really a salesman. He's a salesman of Torah, of truth, of mitzvahs, of chesed. And in order to influence the Talmidim that they would want to learn, so this book has many ideas. It's not Torah, you can't rely on it that way, of course, but it has many practical ideas. L'havdil Elav Havdalos, there are some major works by Gedolei Yisrael on the subject. Rav Shlomo Wolbe Zitzal has an important little sefer. It's for sure available in Lashon Kodesh. I believe there's an edition with Lashon Kodesh and English now. It's called Zriya Uvinyan Bechinuch. It's a small little volume, but it's about eitzes that work in yeshivas in our generation. It's kedai to study that sefer. Thank you. The Slonim Rebbe Zitzal has a little sefer called Nesivus HaChinuch. It has also been published with a Hebrew-English edition. I think you should start collecting good stories. When you hear a story and it has a message, a Torah message, a Musar message, a mitzvah message, that exemplifies one of the great lessons of Yiddishkeit, write it down. Make notes for yourself. Get a Xerox of it. Keep a file of good stories. There's a famous Rebbe, Rabbi Hillel Mendel, who conducts a 2-week teacher training course in Jerusalem every summer. And he, as a Rebbe, had made a file for each of the parshias of the year. And whenever a good story or an einfalt, an idea came to mind, he would record it and put it in the file for that parsha. Finally, I would suggest practice teaching at your own Shabbos table. Look for opportunities. Maybe there's the ladies in your local neighborhood need a shiur on Shabbos afternoon. Maybe they're boys who need a half an hour, 45 minutes on Mishnayos. Try to find opportunities, short opportunities, where you can practice teaching, where you'll have to prepare, where you'll organize your thoughts, make an introduction that catches people's attention, teach what you want to teach, and then have a conclusion. Get practice. There are some people who, after they take a course, and they read their books, and they get ready, they begin substituting. Or they look for a very small part-time position, an hour a day, or an hour a week, with kids. And there they get their experience, and they build up their confidence. So, I wanted to share with you 2 short stories on the subject of teaching. One goes back to when I was here, a student in the yeshiva. Yeshiva was located in Geula, in the old Hebron building. And Rav Horowitz used to occasionally walk to the Kotel. And I would accompany him. And there was one occasion, we were there, and he saw a boy from Great Britain, from an area called Wales. Somehow the boy said hello, he said hello. And he introduced himself and said, "Hi, I'm Baruch, what's your name?" The boy said his name was. And he said, "Would you like to come home and join us for a Suda?" The boy said, "Okay." And we were all walking back together, and the Rosh Yeshiva leans over and whispers in my ear, "The truth is, we already have a full table. Could you take this boy?" I certainly wasn't a teacher yet, just a student at the yeshiva, but I had recently gotten married, and we had guests, so I said, "Sure." When we came home, I noticed that the young man wasn't wearing tzitzis, and I remembered a lesson I had heard. I come from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, originally, and there was a great European Rav there. His name was Yisroel Feldman Zitzal. He had been a Talmud of Rav Meir Shapiro in Chachmei Lublin. And I once, on Parsha Shlach, was present in the shul when the Rav made an impassioned plea that people should wear tzitzis. And he said, "If there's anybody who doesn't have a pair of tzitzis, I will give you my tzitzis. I'll give you a pair." for whatever reason, it stuck and made an impression on me. And I was sitting at the table with this young man, and we were talking about tzitzis somehow. The conversation came up, and I said, if you had a pair of tzitzis, would you wear them? He said, yes. So I went into the other room, and I took off the new pair I had just put on that day. I put on my old pair. I folded up the new pair, and I came out and I said, these are for you. He was all excited, put on his tzitzis. And I didn't see him for quite some time. He went back to his secular school here in Jerusalem. And the next part of the story I didn't witness, it was reported to me. One day he was with a friend in a coffee shop in Yerushalayim. And they get into a conversation. And the friend says, what are those strings dangling from you? And he says, they're not strings. This is the mitzvah of tzitzis. Are you crazy? What is this all about? And they get into a heated conversation. And he blurts out, yes, I'm wearing tzitzis. In fact, if I had tefillin, I would wear tefillin. And it happened to be, by hashgacha, that there was a gevir sitting in the table next to this table. A Yerushalmi fellow. And he knew English, and he understood the conversation. And he stands up and he walks up and he says, did I hear this right? Did you say that if you had a pair of tefillin, you would wear the tefillin? And the boy says, absolutely I would. And there on the spot, the man took out his checkbook and he wrote a check for $250 and he handed it to the boy. Now, you have to realize that year, this was about 1980, I paid $100 a month rent for a 2-room apartment in Jerusalem with a kitchen and a bathroom, $100. This was 2.5 times the rent. The boy was so stunned by this, he didn't really know what to do. He didn't know if it was for real. So where should he go? He went to Rabbi Horowitz, of course. He brought the check. Rabbi Horowitz gave it to the office administrators. And the first thing they did was they called up the bank. And they said, is this a real check? That's how significant the gift was. And it was discovered, yes, it is. And the young man went on to put on tefillin, and he left his secular school and he joined the yeshiva, and he got married and had a beautiful family. That's a true story, exemplifying how you don't have to be a Rebbe. You can start teaching without being a Rebbe. I was just a student, and I had heard a good word from a Rav, and I passed it on to somebody else, and one thing led to another, and it changed this young man's life. And the second story I'm going to tell you, I had occasion to say 1.5 years ago. Is there anybody here who already heard this? If you didn't hear, if you've heard it, it's worth hearing it again. So, again, in about the year 1980 or 1981, the head of Torah U'Masorah in the United States, the organization Rabbi Horowitz was speaking about, that is the largest network of schools in the United States and one of the largest in the world. We have, believe I am, around 750 yeshivas and Beis Yaakovs in the system, and over 250,000 children. So in those days it wasn't as big, but nonetheless, the head of the organization was Dr. Joe Kamenetsky, and he had just retired. He was retiring, and he came to Jerusalem, and Rabbi Horowitz, always looking for somebody to help, immediately said, please come into the yeshiva and conduct a teacher training course. So Dr. Joe said he would love to do that. And that year, he made an organizational meeting, which I was invited to attend. However, the course didn't happen that year. It happened a couple of years later, and I went back to the United States, where I was dropped into a classroom by Torah U'Masorah in Denver, Colorado, kind of parachuted in, with all of 2 hours of teacher training under my belt. And I was in a 6th grade, and the first day of class, there's a boy named Donnie, let's say his name is Donnie, sitting in the front row. The first day of class, this young man jumps out of his seat, and he tackles the boy next to him, and wrestles him to the floor right in front of me. It was stunning. I had no words, let alone no experience or training. I'd never heard of such an event. That was the first day. Imagine what happened to that poor kid during the rest of the year. So, I'm going to first tell you one version of what happened to him. Things got worse. He got in trouble during English, as well as during Limudei Kodesh. He got in trouble on the playground. He was kept after school. Then he was suspended. Then there was a crisis in the board that they didn't trust the principal because the school was so wild, because Donnie was making so much trouble. So they hired an assistant principal in the middle of the year to take care of discipline, to take care of Donnie. And the assistant principal understood he was really going to take care of this kid. And one day in the spring, outside in the playground, he got into a fight again. And the assistant principal took him by the scruff of his neck and brought him into his office, called in his parents, and told them the final verdict. Not is he just going to be suspended again, but at the end of the year, he will be expelled. And in those days, in Denver, Colorado, if a person was expelled from that Torah school, there weren't a lot of options. It meant going to public school. That's how serious the situation is. That's one side of Donnie's experience that year. I'm now going to share with you another side. So in this 6th grade, I had the children of the Rosh Yeshiva. There was one boy who learned 750 Mishnayos Baal Peh that year on his own. And there was Donnie. And there was another kid named Shmuel who came in every day with a cowboy hat after he milked the cows. And I went to the principal and I said, you know, it's really not fair for these kids because they're on such different levels. I think we should divide the class into, at least when it comes to the study of Gemara, and the upper level will study Gemara, and the shvacher kids, the weaker kids, will learn Mishnayos. The principal said, you know, this is a great idea. I'm going to take the Gemara group, and I'm going to leave the Mishnayos with Donnie and you. I said, fine. So now I had Donnie and Shmuel and that Kevra, and I was supposed to do something with them. And I was racking my brains, how can I motivate these kids? How can I make them understand the value and the beauty of Yiddishkeit? So I thought, we'll study Mishnayos Shabbos. And just by talking about the halachas, they'll hear a little bit about what Shabbos is. And I would invite pairs of kids home to taste the Shabbos in my own house with permission from their parents. And I still, even with this plan, I still rack my brains. And one day we were coming to the Mishnah that talked about indirect fire, let's say from the sun. And one of the modern day toldos of this is electricity. What are the repercussions halakhically about electricity? So I came in that day and I said, boys, I have an important announcement to make. I want everyone to know before we start studying the following announcement. And that is, I want you to recognize that I am the wealthiest man in Denver. And there were guffaws and laughter. One kid said, Rebbe, we know what your car looks like. And I said, no, I can prove it to you. There was a multi-millionaire in Denver by the name of Miles Davis. I said, if Mr. Davis were to call me up and say, Rabbi Bernstein, I know you don't have any assets yourself, but I have a very big deal, and I want you to be a partner. And if you sign on this deal and become my partner, you're going to make millions of dollars. Let's say $5 million. All you have to do is come in this Saturday morning at 10:30 to my office and sign the contract. I would say, I'm sorry, Mr. Davis. I can't come because I have something more valuable than those $5 million. I have my Shabbos. So that's why, guys, I'm the wealthiest man in Denver. There was a rare moment of silence in the class. And Donnie raised his hand. And he wasn't going to hit somebody. I said, yes, Donnie. And Donnie said, Rabbi, what if it wasn't $5 million? What if it was $10 million? I said, you got it done. For $10 million, I wouldn't go into the office and sign that contract. And that's why I'm the wealthiest man in Denver. Silence again. And Donnie's hand goes up again. He said, yes, Donnie. He says, Rabbi, what if it was $100 million? Wouldn't God want you to sign that contract? Because then you wouldn't have to teach in this school anymore. You could study Torah. I said, Donnie, you're right. Even for $100 million. That's why I wouldn't sign. That's why I'm so wealthy. And then we learned the mission. And in the discussion, I said, we learned a little bit about, as I said, indirect fire and electricity. We taught in a few contemporary topics. And for some reason, when we were walking in the hall that day, I thought to myself, you know, I have a new picture about Donnie. I see that he understands profit and loss. He knows something about ruchnius, what the Almighty would want. I should break the Shabbos. I shouldn't break the Shabbos. It's very interesting. It's a real insight into the kid. So as we were passing in the hall, he was going one way and I was going the other. I just walked over and I whispered in his ear, Donnie, if you just don't turn on the television this Shabbos, I guarantee you a portion in Oilum Haba. Don't ask me how I know how to guarantee portions in Oilum Haba. That's just what came to my mind, because I thought maybe that would appeal to the kid's profit and loss statement. It's the same kid who's getting in all this trouble. That Shabbos, Donnie didn't turn on the television. And we kept learning more and more Mishnayos about Shabbos and more halachas. And in his suburb, this kid, Donnie, starts practicing more and more levels of Shabbos observance. One day, it's Saturday morning. He has a brother, a 5th grade brother, who's a brilliant kid, does everything right. And his father and his brother say to him, okay, Donnie, we're all getting in the car because we're going over to the synagogue this morning. And Donnie says, oh no, I can't go. They say, why can't you go? And he says, because I don't drive on Shabbos. I said, you don't drive on Shabbos? So what are you going to do? I don't know. Do you know how to daven? No, I don't know how to daven. And they got into a little sichsoch, a little dispute in the family. But he, just as he was stubborn about his other matters, when it came to Shabbos, he was also stubborn. And interestingly, when we invited him as our guest for Shabbos, he was the perfect angel. The last kid you would expect, this wild guy in school. When he came, he would sit and say, oh, Mrs. Bernstein, is there anything I can do to help? Can I bring something to the table? Can I clean this up? It was, you'd never know. I would, in the classroom, that's what I told you earlier, there's a special dynamic in the classroom. We'd never known this side of this kid's personality if I hadn't met him outside the classroom. At the end of the year, I signed up to join a kollel in Indiana. So I was leaving Denver. And the Rosh Yeshiva, whose son learned the 750 Mishnayos, made a little party for me and asked me to say a few words. And I said, I do have one request for the people who are here. There's this boy, Donnie, and he comes from this non-observant home, and he started to keep Shabbos. Just as he's come to my home, I would hope that next year and coming years, you'll invite him to your homes so that he will continue to learn about Shabbos and observance. Because next year he's going to public school. And that's what happened. I went to Indiana. He went to public school. But he kept his Shabbos. And people on the west side, the religious side of town, kept inviting him. And eventually, he went to Yeshiva High School, where he was promptly thrown out as he deserved. And went to another high school, and I think another high school. And did graduate, and came to Israel and learned in one of those Batei Midrashim for the guys who worked so matzliach in high school. And he learned, and he learned, and he learned. And he was mikarev his brother, and his father, and his mother. And he went on to learn in Kola, and built a beautiful family. And a few years ago, I had the privilege of having Donnie and his wife and children in my sukkah in Monsey, New York, where I live. And we were trading Divrei Torah, singing Zmiras. And I thought to myself, who is wealthier, Miles Davis or David Bernstein? And that's what I say is the wealth that you gentlemen could have if indeed you choose to go into the field of being a Malad. So we started with some very serious subjects, and we ended up with a couple of stories. If there are any questions on any of this or on any related topic to chinuch, I'd be happy to try and answer. Please introduce yourself.
My name is Guy. My question is, if someone learns in Kollel every day, all week, all month, all year, let's say he lives to 80, so according to the Chofetz Chaim, so many words per hour, so he learns his whole life, teaches, his kids and whatever, he basically he learns, he doesn't teach. And then you have somebody who teaches and he's able to mikar someone to Yiddishkeit. So let's say he has a regular job, or he doesn't learn in Kollel all day, maybe an hour a day, maybe a little bit on Shabbat, but he doesn't learn all this time. But he's able to bring in his life one person who's not religious to become religious. Which is more powerful, and why, and what are the sources, if you know them?
For this question, you need to go ask your Rav.
I ask everybody, like you said, 5 different people.
Good for you.
I follow your example.
Okay, so I'm going to share with you another short story about this.
Okay.
This isn't going to answer directly, but I'm going to tell you a short story. In the period right after World War II, there were a number of Gedolei Yisrael who were very influential in the world, and one of them was named Reuven Grozovsky. Reb Reuven had been recruited by Shraga Feivel Mendelowitz, who Rabbi Horowitz described earlier as the principal in Torah Vadas, the most important yeshiva in the United States, and the founder of Torah Masorah. And when Reb Reuven came to the United States, he not only became Rosh Yeshiva of Torah Vadas, but he became one of the leaders of Agudas Yisrael, and the leader of one of the key leaders in Torah Masorah. In fact, the negotiations, the sensitive negotiations that went on between the Frunk community and Ben Gurion right after the war, what would enable Agudas Yisrael to serve as a political party in the Knesset, the conditions were that the government would have to keep Shabbos, and that the yeshiva boys would be exempt from military service, and that the government would keep kashrus. Those 3 conditions were made up by Rabbi Reuven Grozovsky from the United States. That's how significant a player he has been in history. So, shortly after the war, one of his grandsons succeeded in founding another Masifta, another boys' high school in New York. And he invited his grandfather, Reb Reuven, to come see. And he came. And afterwards, the young man came to his grandfather and said, "So, Zaidi, what do you say?" And Reb Reuven said, "I think what you're doing is great. But if I were you, I would give up the Masifta and I would go out into one of those small out-of-town day schools that Torah Masorah is starting to teach little children." grandson looked out at his grandfather and didn't have anything to say. He was just, amazed. Why would he take him away from teaching Gemara on a high level, raising a new generation, helping to build the Kollel movement? Rav Reuven saw the question in the young man's face. He said, I see you don't understand. So let me explain. If I could, I would, but I can't. Meaning, Rav Reuven's position was that Hatzolas Nefashos in today's world was so big that if he could give up his being Rosh Yeshiva and the Torah learning he was doing, it's hard to say that, and his position as one of the heads of Agudas Yisrael and Torah Masorah, and go and be a third grade Rebbe in Arizona, that's what he would do. But he said, I can't. I have these obligations that are pulling me. But that's what I would do if I could. So that was Reuven Rozovsky's response. Not exactly an answer to the same question, but a similar question about the importance of going out and helping children.
We're not. These are not religious kids.
Somewhere. Yes.
I was just going to say, well...
Who are you?
Gani. Gimel Nun Yud, Gan Shali.
Okay.
Not Gary, Gani.
Got it.
Just saying. I have a thing called Asperger's syndrome. And it's a hereditary thing. My children will all have it. Now, from what I remember of school, it was pretty much hell. I hated it. Every single day of my life, I despised. Every day I would dread going into that classroom I saw as a cage. I mean, I liked learning, but I hated being with the other students, mostly because they would beat me up. And then, of course, I would get in trouble for fighting back, and the teachers would say, oh, he's starting things up. They started with me. What was I supposed to do? They stole my stuff. What, was I supposed to be nice to them? Forget it. I mean, you know what I mean? And also the teachers would often have their issues, take them out on me. I hated it. And I was like, why should I send my kids to such a hellhole? I could teach, let them learn at home, let them learn, not let them go through all this nonsense, go through all this, petty things, not let them be pariahs. I don't want my kids to be pariahs, I want them to learn.
So what's your question, Gani?
Is it alright if I not send them to school?
First of all, are you married?
No.
Not yet. You're not married.
I don't have kids yet, but I'm just thinking about it. I'm thinking about it very hard. Because I did not like school when I was growing up. I hated it. I learned 9/10 of everything from my parents, outside of school, by myself. I learned more by myself than I ever did in the classroom. The classroom was more of an impediment. It didn't help me. It was holding me back. Because I was too filled with anxiety about what these kids were going to do to me, what the teachers were going to do to me. And the teachers often made false statements about me to my parents. So, that was my experience with school.
I thank you for sharing that with everybody here. Yeah. Because for people who are thinking of becoming Rebbein, one of the notes up here was about under teaching skills is to understand child growth and development, and that includes exceptional children. Exceptional children is another topic a person has to understand. And we don't treat all children the same. And on behalf of whatever school you went to, I apologize to you. It's a terrible, terrible story you just told us, and an important story.
Not all the teachers were bad, but most. I
understand, but it's important that everybody hear what a perspective of a child in a classroom can be. And that's why it takes so much study to learn how to become a Rebbe. It's not something you just walk into. What do you do when a kid is acting out? You have to understand what are the causes. There are many different reasons why a child may act out. It's beyond the scope of this conversation. But Gani has just shared with us one very painful story. And I'm very happy that he found his way through, because there are many children who went through Gani's experience who didn't find their way through. we have statistics today that approximately 1/6 of yeshiva children leave the fold. They abandon Yiddishkeit. And so a Rebbe said earlier at the beginning that a Rebbe has the Dam Kol Yisrael Tolui B'Tzavoro. He really does. We can't allow 1/6 of the class. We've got a class of 24. That means 4 kids that you're teaching are just going to go off the path. That's why one really has to learn one's malacha. And then, this is an appropriate way to end, I think, is one has to daven for siyata d'shmaya. With all of these techniques and strategies for preparation, it's all about siyata d'shmaya. I recently heard from Avi Shulman, who was one of the leaders of Torah Masorah for decades. He said, the tefillah comes first. All the chachma and all the preparations come second. We rely on the Eibishter, and we daven to him for his support. And in addition to that, then we go do all of our obligations. Thank you very much. I wish you all ksila toiva. You should have hatzlacha, being lomed and malamed. Thank you.